Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I want to share with you some powerful lessons from Paul's prison epistles. Letters he wrote while in chains, yet filled with joy, encouragement, and truth. These writings remind us that the gospel is not bound by circumstances, and they teach us how to live as mature Christians who reflect Christ in our daily lives. When I studied these letters, I was struck first by how Paul never stopped ministering, even in hardship. In Colossians, Paul reminds the church that Christ is supreme, the image of the invisible God, the one who holds all things together. Imagine that. Paul sitting in prison, yet lifting up Christ's supremacy as the foundation of faith. That convicted me to preach boldly about Christ, even in seasons when I feel limited. We learn here that our effectiveness isn't about where we are, but about who we serve. Philemon gives us another picture. Here, Paul appeals for Onesimus, not as a runaway slave, but as a brother in Christ. What stands out is that Paul doesn't command Philemon with authority. Instead, he appeals with love. That shows us that gospel-centered leadership is not about control, but reconciliation. In a world full of division, the church must be a place where forgiveness and grace transform relationships. Ephesians carries this even further. Chapters 1 and 2 remind us how rich we are in Christ. Paul says we are chosen, adopted, and sealed with the Spirit, made alive by grace through faith. This truth grounds our identity, not in performance, not in works, but in God's gift of salvation. And in chapter 3, Paul explains the mystery of the gospel, that Jews and Gentiles alike are united in one body. That means the church is a living picture of God's wisdom. Unity doesn't mean we're all the same. It means God's grace makes us one family in Christ. By the time we reach chapters 4 through 6, Paul gets very practical. He urges us to live worthy of our calling, walking in love, living in unity, and putting on the full armor of God. These chapters remind me that faith must touch every area of life: our marriages, our families, our work, and even our spiritual battles. Maturity in Christ isn't just what we believe, it's how we live. Finally, Philippians reminds us of the joy found in Christ. Paul, once again in chains, declares that the gospel is advancing. He shows us that joy is not tied to circumstances, but to knowing Jesus. Even when others preach with wrong motives, Paul rejoiced that Christ is proclaimed. That challenges me to trust God's plan beyond my own perspective. Philippians also reminds us to value Christ above all, to pursue maturity, and to live in peace. And in the end, Paul thanks the Philippians for their gift, calling it a pleasing sacrifice to God. It's a beautiful picture of how generosity and partnership in the gospel glorify the Lord. So, what do we learn from these prison epistles? 3 main things stand out to me. Christ is supreme and central. Our faith must always start here. The gospel transforms relationships, bringing forgiveness, reconciliation, and unity. Maturity in Christ is practical, shaping how we live, how we love, and how we endure trials. As I've reflected on these letters, I've realized that Paul's message is just as relevant for us today. Whether we're in seasons of joy or hardship, Christ is enough. Whether we face division or unity, the gospel calls us to reconciliation. And whether we're struggling or thriving, maturity in Christ means learning to depend fully on Him in every situation. My prayer is that hearing these truths will encourage you to study these epistles yourself. I pray these truths help you grow as disciples who not only know the gospel, but live it out, just as Paul did, even while in chains. Thank you for spending this time with me today. God bless.